Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to the walk. Today is Monday, February 10th, and we are up to Ezekiel 35. We have been doing a deep dive of Ezekiel. This adventure started all the way back in July. We are up to Ezekiel chapter 35, and there are 48 chapters. So we're going to be in this for quite a while. We're going really deep. So when you look at Ezekiel 35, and I always look at multiple translations, one of the things that I found very interesting was the subtitle in the ESV is Prophecy Against Mount Seir. But then as I continued to dig, some of the translations use the word Edom instead of Seir. And I was like, why is there that difference? So it took me a while. I read a lot of different things about it. I read a lot of websites, really did some research. And what it all boiled down to is the two words are interchangeable. They are almost used at, not almost, they are. They're used as synonyms. But when you really examine that area, Edom was a nation, and within Edom, there was this mountain called Seir. So if you look at multiple translations, you may see the word Seir. You may also see the word Edom, but it's talking about the same area. So it's important that we understand that. When I went to the Apologetics Study Bible, they had a note about that, about this judgment message. Now, there was some debate about whether or not this message was in the right place within Ezekiel. So I'm just going to read this to you verbatim. It said, why was another judgment message spoken against Edom? Remember, earlier we saw one. Some interpreters suggest this message was either superfluous or misplaced and should be moved perhaps to chapter 25, verses 12 to 14, where it talked about the curse against Edom. But the message indeed was appropriate as a solemn reminder of the tragedy of Esau's descendants, the Edomites. So keep that in mind. The people living in Edom are called Edomites, and they descended from Esau. Remember, Esau was Jacob's twin. Jacob's descendants would receive the blessing Isaac gave to Jacob in Genesis 27, verses 27 to 29. Mention of the judgment of Edom was a reminder of Esau's loss and a fitting prelude to the restoration of Israel. The Edomites opposed Israel and finally were judged. So these Edomites were enemies of Israel. It's important that we keep that in mind as we go through all of the messages for Ezekiel 35, because that is why there is a prophecy against these people. Verse 1, the word of the Lord came to me, Son of man, set your face against Mount Seir and prophesy against it. So in the Cultural Study Bible, they had a note about this that piqued my curiosity, and I had more questions than I did answers after reading this. So I'm going to read this Cultural Study Bible note, and it said, for Mount Seir, this ancient name of the mountainous region south of the Dead Sea on both sides of the Rift Valley running south of the Gulf of Aqaba, the name Seir is found in the 14th century BC or Amarna letters from Egypt. According to scripture, the mountains of Seir were occupied first by the Horites in Deuteronomy 2:12 and 22, and who were later displaced by the Edomites. Seir became synonymous with the entire country of Edom. Okay, we already talked about that. But I got curious about this name Seir and wanted to know more about it. And what I found is it's derived from a noun, an adjective, and a verb, and the meanings were quite interesting. If it is used as a noun, it means horror, like absolute and utter horror. If it's used in an adjective, it means hairy. And if you remember, Esau was very hairy. So Jacob's mother, when Jacob basically stole the blessing from Esau, Jacob's mother said to put on some fur on your arm. So when your father reaches out to you, he will think you're Esau because Esau was born first. It can also mean a he-goat or a she-goat, and it can mean bearded grain. In the verb, it means to sweep or whirl away, usually in relation to a storm or wind. Here's why this is significant. It is significant because these Edomites are trying to be that storm of war. They're enemies of the Israelites, and they have made, throughout the Bible, they make several attempts to overthrow the Israelites and take that holy land by force. Now, how does this apply to us in our spiritual lives? We have to be aware that throughout the Bible, there are enemies of God's people. And it's okay that there's enemies of God's people. We are not in heaven yet. There is going to be that conflict, but we've got to remember that God is God and he cares for us, and he takes care of us and nurtures us. Have a wonderful day. God bless, and keep walking the walk.